What happens when one careless text turns a perfect engagement into a public disaster? Why did he stay calm while I tried to save face? How can one photo, one message, undo everything I thought I controlled? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Seren Vale, and if you told me 3 months ago that one text message would destroy my engagement, I would have laughed. I thought Evan and I were solid, smart, loyal, picture perfect. Everyone said we were the kind of couple that made other people believe in love again. But all it took was one careless moment during our engagement photo shoot, one vibration from my phone, and everything started falling apart. I didn't mean for him to see it. I wasn't even thinking when I replied to Darren. It was harmless, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. Just an old ex checking in, nothing more. The photographer said, "Look at each other," and when I turned, Evan was already staring. At the screen, at my words, at the stupid little heart emoji I'd sent back. The rest of the day went on like a performance, smiles for the camera, laughter that felt like glass in my throat. By sunset, he wasn't angry or loud. He was quiet, distant, polite. That scared me more than anything. I thought silence meant forgiveness. I didn't realize it meant he'd already started collecting proof. I still remember the exact second everything went wrong. The sound of camera shutters, the wind off the river, and the tiny buzz of my phone that changed everything. The day was supposed to be perfect. I'd booked the photographer months in advance, picked the cream dress that made my skin look warm on camera, even convinced Evan to take the morning off work. He didn't like things like this, posing, smiling, pretending, but he did it for me. That's what made him special. At least, that's what I used to tell everyone. The sun was too bright when we started. The photographer told us to walk slowly along the promenade, hand in hand. I could feel Evan's palm sweating against mine, but I ignored it. My hair looked amazing. I'd checked it a dozen times. The goal was to get those effortless, magazine-style shots that make people think love is easy. I laughed on cue, turned toward him, and tilted my head like I'd practiced. Then my phone buzzed in my back pocket, one soft vibration that I should have ignored. I tried to keep smiling as I reached behind me and slipped it out, just to make sure it wasn't work. Evan hates when I check my phone mid-photo, but I figured he wouldn't notice. Except he did. I saw his eyes flick down, right as the message preview flashed across the screen. "Darren, miss seeing you smile like that." I froze. My fingers twitched. Evan's hand slipped out of mine. The photographer kept talking, something about finding softer light, but I didn't hear him. I tapped the message open before I could stop myself. I shouldn't have replied, but I did. You always knew how to say the right thing. Send. My thumb moved faster than my brain. When I looked up, Evan was still watching me. He didn't say anything, not right away. He just nodded slightly, the way he does when he's deciding how much something matters. That calm expression of his made my stomach knot. I laughed it off, told him it was just Darren being Darren, harmless. He didn't argue. He just turned to the photographer and said he needed a minute. I watched him walk toward the benches near the water. The wind caught his hair. He looked composed, maybe too composed. I could have run after him, but instead I stayed where I was, pretending to check my makeup on the phone screen. Behind me, the photographer asked if everything was okay. I told her Evan was just hot, that he gets overwhelmed sometimes. She nodded sympathetically, the way people do when they think they're hearing something deep. Evan came back 10 minutes later, face unreadable. We finished the shoot in silence. Every smile felt heavy, like it belonged to someone else. When he held me for the close-ups, his hands rested politely on my arms, not possessive, not warm. The photographer said we looked elegant together. I wanted to believe that was a compliment. By the time we got back to the car, my nerves were raw. I started talking before he even buckled his seatbelt. About lighting, about how professional the photographer seemed, about how it'd all look amazing online. He nodded once and started the engine. That silence again, the kind that fills up every inch of air until you can't breathe. Halfway home, I tried a different tactic. I said I didn't mean anything by it, that Darren was just being nostalgic. Evan kept his eyes on the road. He said, "You replied." Just that. I said it was instinct, that I didn't want to seem rude. He said, "To him." His voice wasn't sharp, it was too calm. That tone people use when they've already decided something. I felt my chest tighten. I told him he was overreacting, that if he trusted me, he'd know better. He didn't answer. I said he always does this, turns small things into stories. That's when he looked at me for the first time since the park. "You already wrote your own story," he said quietly, then turned back to the road. When we got home, he went straight to the bedroom and started changing out of his dress shirt. I followed, still talking, saying I didn't deserve the cold shoulder over a stupid message. He didn't argue. He just said he was tired and wanted to shower. That calm made me furious. If he'd shouted, I could have fought back. But he didn't. He just picked up his phone, typed something, and placed it face down on the dresser. I caught a glimpse of the screen before it went dark. A note titled, "Archive A." I thought it was work. He's always organizing data, labeling files, saving receipts. It didn't seem important. I told myself he'd cool off after some space. Later that night, I tried to act normal. I poured wine, sat beside him on the couch, scrolled through the photos the photographer had sent as previews. Some were beautiful. Me laughing, his arm around me, the river behind us like a painting. I posted one, captioned it "The Start of Forever." I turned the phone toward him, asked which filter looked best. He said they all looked fine. I should have known then. He went to bed early, leaving his mug next to mine on opposite ends of the counter. I noticed that without meaning to, the separation, like he was drawing invisible lines through the apartment. When I climbed into bed, he was already asleep on his side, phone face down on the nightstand. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was nothing, that couples fight and move on. The next morning, he was gone before I woke. His side of the bed was perfectly smooth, like he'd never slept there at all. On the kitchen counter, 2 mugs again. His washed and dried, mine still half full and cold. My phone buzzed, a message from Darren asking if everything was okay, if Evan had seen. I typed "he's fine," then deleted it before sending. I opened the photos again and stared at one where Evan wasn't looking at me. He was staring past me, straight at something only he could see. For the first time, the picture looked wrong. Not because of the lighting, but because I couldn't tell what side of the lens I was on, the one being captured or the one being watched. That afternoon, I noticed a small sound near the printer. It was humming, slow, steady. When I checked, a blank page had come out. The smell of toner lingered. I pulled it out, confused, and saw another sheet already queued inside. It was labeled simply, "Photo Session 1." I didn't open it. I just turned off the printer, telling myself I was imagining things. When Evan came home that night, he was polite again. He asked about my day, said dinner smelled good, complimented the candles I'd lit. It felt like normalcy forced into shape. I told myself this meant he'd forgiven me. I leaned against him during a movie, pretending not to notice how he stayed perfectly still. Before bed, I checked my phone again. Darren had sent another text, still thinking about that smile. I hovered over reply. Instead, I turned the screen face down, the way Evan always did. The gesture felt strange, almost like surrender. But I told myself it was maturity, that this was how you prove trust. When I switched off the lamp, I heard a faint click from the other side of the bed, Evan's phone locking. Then the quiet beep of something uploading, I closed my eyes and told myself it was nothing, just work. Tomorrow we'd be fine. We had to be. Because if we weren't, I didn't know what I'd tell everyone who thought we were perfect. I still remember the final sound before I fell asleep, the soft vibration of his phone against the nightstand. One short buzz followed by silence. I didn't look. I should have. The next morning felt too quiet. I woke up to the smell of coffee but no sound of movement, just that faint hum from the refrigerator and the tick of the kitchen clock. Evan always left early for work, but today the air itself felt emptied out, like the apartment was holding its breath. His side of the bed was untouched again, pillow still neat, blanket folded halfway. I sat up, blinking at the sunlight cutting through the curtains, trying to remember if we'd even said goodnight properly. On the counter, next to his clean mug, was a folded note that only said, "Left early, busy day." I read it twice, hearing the distance in 2 short sentences. I wanted to text him something casual. "Love you, drive safe." But my thumb hovered over the screen too long. I ended up typing nothing. Work didn't help. Everyone kept asking how the engagement shoot went, expecting me to gush about it. I smiled on cue, said it was magical, that Evan had been perfect. My coworker, June, laughed and said she couldn't wait to see the photos. I told her I'd post them soon, pretending I hadn't already. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, half expecting it to be Evan, half afraid it wasn't. Around lunch, I finally got a message from him. Just one line, "Hope your day's going well." I stared at it longer than I should have, waiting for something else, maybe a heart, maybe a question, but nothing came. I sent back, "Busy but fine. Miss you." He didn't reply. By the time I got home, the sun was setting, and the apartment smelled faintly of detergent. He'd done a load of laundry, his, not mine. His shirts hung neatly on the rack by the balcony door. He was in the living room with his laptop open, posture straight, face unreadable. I asked if he'd eaten. He said he wasn't hungry. I tried to lighten the mood, telling him the photographer had emailed more pictures. He nodded, eyes still on the screen. I said the one of us laughing by the railing was my favorite. He said, "That's good," and kept typing. Something in the calmness made my voice sharper than I meant. "So you're really not going to talk about it?" I asked. He looked up, eyebrows drawn slightly. "Talk about what?" "You know what." He tilted his head, that careful gesture he uses when he wants me to fill in the silence myself. I sighed. The text. "Darren, you acting like I did something horrible." He closed the laptop slowly. "Did you?" I laughed, too loudly. "Of course not. You're being ridiculous." He said nothing for a while, just studied me, like he was memorizing a version of me he hadn't seen before. Finally, he said, "You always call things ridiculous when they make you uncomfortable." I crossed my arms. "You're twisting everything. It was harmless." "I didn't say it wasn't," he said evenly. "I'm just listening." "Then stop listening like a therapist and talk to me like a fiancé." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "I'm trying." He stood, went to the kitchen, and rinsed his mug again. I followed, trying to keep the conversation alive. "You know what? Maybe you should relax. I can't control who texts me." "I never asked you to." "Then why are you acting like I cheated?" "I'm not acting," he said quietly. "I'm thinking." That calm tone again. It unnerved me more than shouting ever could. I slammed the fridge door a little too hard. "You're unbelievable. I'm standing here trying to fix things, and you just—" He interrupted softly. "You're trying to control the narrative." The words hit like a slap, mostly because they were so measured. I told him he was reading too many psychology blogs, that not everything was some deep emotional tactic. He said nothing, just wiped his hands with a towel, folded it neatly, and set it on the counter. When he went to the bedroom, I caught the faint click of a drawer locking. I frowned. "Since when do you lock drawers?" "Since now." "What's even in there?" "Private things." Private. We're engaged, Evan. What could you possibly need to hide? He looked at me over his shoulder. Privacy isn't hiding. Then he shut the door. I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door, half tempted to knock, half afraid of what I'd say if he answered. The printer in the corner hummed suddenly, that same low sound as before. When I looked, it had spit out another blank page. The smell of toner made the room feel smaller. That night, I poured another glass of wine and called my mother. She always knew how to make things about me sound justified. I told her Evan was being distant over something stupid. She asked what happened, and I said he'd seen a message from Darren, that he was blowing it out of proportion. She sighed like she'd expected it. Men can't handle confident women, honey. They always want control. I smiled at the comfort in her voice. Exactly. It's not even like I did anything. Then don't act guilty, be firm, remind him who you are. I've tried, but he's just calm, too calm. That means he knows he's wrong. Silence is how weak men punish strong women. Her words melted into me like sugar. I thanked her, promised to come by for lunch soon. When I hung up, Evan was standing in the doorway. I didn't know how long he'd been there. His expression was blank, but his eyes were sharp. Was that your mother? He asked. Yeah. Why? She gives good advice. Usually. He nodded once and walked past me to the kitchen. He poured water into his glass, drank half and said, I hope you listened to her. Later, while he showered, I opened his laptop. I told myself I had the right. It's not like I didn't trust him. I just wanted to know what he was doing that kept him so distant. The screen was already on, a spreadsheet open. Columns of dates, times, and words like photos, bank, archive. My name wasn't there, but the titles made me uneasy. A browser tab blinked at the top. Storage options, secure sync. I closed it quickly, heart thudding. By the time he came out, I was pretending to scroll on my phone. He asked if I'd seen his blue folder. I said no, trying to sound casual. He nodded and said he'd find it later. We ate dinner in silence. The candles I lit flickered against the polished silverware. When I tried to joke that we looked like a couple in a movie, he smiled faintly, but didn't meet my eyes. At bedtime, I reached for his hand. He didn't pull away, but he didn't hold on either. I whispered that I was sorry for making him uncomfortable. He said, You're not sorry, you just don't like tension. I wanted to argue, but he turned off the light before I could. The room filled with darkness and the quiet tap of rain against the window. I stared into it, telling myself he'd calm down soon. People fight before weddings. It's normal. Just before I drifted off, I heard a soft mechanical sound, the faint hum of the printer again. I almost got up to check, but I was too tired. Somewhere between waking and sleep, I thought I heard a notification ping from his phone, a single beep, and then silence. When I woke the next morning, he was gone again. Only his half of the closet door was open, his shirts lined up in perfect rows. On the dresser, under the edge of his watch box, was a small sticky note. It said, Bring forms. I stared at it for a long time, not sure what kind of forms he meant. Then I crumpled it and threw it away. I told myself it probably had nothing to do with me. By Friday, everyone at work already knew something was off. I could feel it in the way people looked at me, half curious, half entertained. I'd told June and Marla that Evan and I were just working through communication stuff, which sounded better than, my fiancé has turned into a statue who prints blank pages at night. They both laughed like it was normal pre-wedding stress. I wanted to believe that. At lunch, they asked if I'd picked a date for the bridal shower. I said I was waiting for Evan to confirm his family's schedule, though the truth was, we hadn't talked about it in a week. June teased that I was letting him control too much. I smiled, pretending that wasn't exactly what my mother had said too. When I checked my phone, there were 3 missed calls from Darren. I'd ignored the first 2, but curiosity won. I texted, Can't talk right now. He replied instantly, Just wanted to say you looked incredible in those photos. He doesn't even deserve you. I stared at it, pulse rising, half flattered, half guilty. Then another message. Hope he's not giving you grief. I told myself replying would only make things worse. Still, I typed, "It's fine. Don't worry about it." A second later, I deleted it, then rewrote it softer. "He's just stressed. Everything's fine." I hit send. 2 minutes later, he replied with a single heart emoji. My stomach tightened. I locked my phone and went back to pretending I was listening to Marla talk about her weekend plans. That night, Evan wasn't home when I got back. The apartment felt cleaner than usual, almost sterile. A faint smell of toner still lingered in the air. I noticed the printer tray was empty again. On the coffee table sat a single photo from the engagement shoot, printed on glossy paper. Me laughing, Evan looking at the ground. The back had a small date written in his handwriting. I slid it back under a magazine. He came home later, carrying groceries. I tried to sound cheerful, asking what he'd bought, but he just said, "the usual," and unpacked everything in precise silence. When he placed 2 mugs on the counter, his and mine, side by side but not touching, I felt something twist inside me. I told him we should go out that weekend, have a nice dinner somewhere, just us. He said, "Maybe." Saturday morning, my mother called. She'd heard from Aunt Leona that Evan's parents cancelled a brunch they'd planned for us. "You see," she said, "he's already pulling away. That's what men do when they're losing control." I told her she was overreacting, though her words stuck in my chest. I decided to meet Chloe, my maid of honor, for coffee. She's always been more level-headed. When I told her about Evan's behavior, she frowned and said, maybe he just needed reassurance. I rolled my eyes. He's the one acting suspicious, not me. Chloe stirred her drink slowly. "Seren, did you ever actually delete Darren's messages?" I froze for half a second too long. "Of course I did." She gave me that skeptical look she gets when she knows I'm lying but doesn't want to call me out directly. "Then maybe stop posting pictures that make it look like you're flirting with ghosts." "What's that supposed to mean?" "You captioned one, 'Missing the old days.' That doesn't exactly scream happily engaged." I laughed awkwardly. "It was about college, not Darren." She sighed. "You know what people will think." When I left the cafe, I checked my phone out of habit. A notification banner blinked across the top. Someone had tagged me in a post. It was one of the photos from our shoot, me smiling alone, Evan cropped, halfway out. The caption read, "Every bride has secrets." I didn't recognize the account. My heart dropped. I called Chloe immediately, but she hadn't seen it yet. I tried to report the post, but by the time I refreshed the page, it had hundreds of likes. The comments were already turning snide, people asking where the groom was. One of Darren's old friends even commented, "Guess she upgraded." When Evan got home that evening, I was pacing the living room. I showed him the post, voice trembling with anger. "Someone's trying to humiliate me." He looked at the screen for a moment, then asked, "Why do you think it's about you?" I blinked, "Because my face is literally in it." He nodded once. "Maybe you should take a break from social media." "That's your solution?" "It's an option," he said, walking toward the guest room. I followed him, furious. "You're supposed to defend me. You think I did this?" He paused by the doorway. "I don't need to think anything. I already know what's true." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm watching." Then he closed the door. That sentence stayed with me all night. I couldn't sleep. I kept unlocking my phone, scrolling through comments, refreshing notifications, trying to control the damage. I ended up blocking Darren after seeing he'd liked the post. For some reason, that small act made me feel victorious, even though my stomach was still churning. By morning, Evan was already gone again. On the counter sat another sticky note, paper drop 11 cows. Next to it, his ring. I picked it up, heart pounding, and slipped it into my pocket. I told myself he was just tired, overwhelmed, maybe planning some dramatic gesture. At work, the whispers had spread. June leaned over my desk, phone in hand. "Is this you? It's going viral." I snatched the phone and saw the same image reposted by a gossip account with the caption, "Local marketing manager's engagement hits turbulence after flirty exchange leaks." "How did they even get that?" I muttered. June shrugged. "Maybe someone sold it. You know how people are." I forced a laugh. "People are ridiculous." But my chest felt hollow. When I stepped outside for air, my phone buzzed again. A text from Darren. "Didn't mean for it to blow up. You okay?" My pulse quickened. I typed, "You need to stop messaging me," then deleted it, replaced it with, "Just stay out of it." Back inside, my manager called me into her office. She said she'd seen the post too and thought it was unprofessional optics for the company. I smiled and said it was a misunderstanding. She suggested I take a few days off to let things cool down. I left early, angry and embarrassed. When I got home, the lights were off. Evan's laptop was on the table, screen glowing faintly. A folder labeled Receipts was open. Inside were images, screenshots of texts, timestamps, even my deleted messages to Darren. My breath caught. How had he... I heard a sound behind me and spun around. Evan stood in the hallway, calm as ever. "Were you looking for something?" I forced a smile. "I was just cleaning up." He nodded. "You've been deleting a lot lately." My throat went dry. "That's none of your business." He studied me for a moment, then said, "You make everything my business when you post it online." I wanted to scream, but the evenness in his voice stopped me. Instead, I said, "So what? You're spying on me now." He closed the laptop gently. "No, just keeping copies." "Copies of what?" "The truth." That silence after felt unbearable. I tried to change the subject, asked if he wanted dinner. He said he already ate. I told him I was tired of walking on eggshells. He said he was tired of pretending we were still the same people. When I went to bed that night, he didn't follow. I heard him in the living room, the faint click of his keyboard, then the low hum of the printer again. The sound made my skin crawl. I lay there, staring at the ceiling until the noise stopped. In the morning, the printer tray was empty again, but a faint smudge of black ink streaked across the top sheet. I turned it over. Written in his precise handwriting were 3 words: "File uploaded successfully." For the first time, I felt afraid, not of him, but of how calm he could be while everything I built was starting to crack. Sunday dinner at Evan's parents' house used to be my favorite ritual. Real candles, a long table, everyone laughing about harmless things like vacation plans or work annoyances. This time, the laughter never even started. I'd thought, maybe if I dressed well enough, smiled wide enough, they'd forget the online mess. But when we arrived, Eileen greeted us with a thin smile, and Robert only said, "Let's eat before it gets cold." The roast smelled incredible, but every bite tasted like cardboard. Evan sat across from me, quiet as usual, answering his mother's polite questions about work, while I filled the silence with nervous chatter. I told them about the venue's new floral arrangement, the caterer upgrade, how the photographer said our photos might make the magazine's Engagement of the Month section. No one looked impressed. Finally, Robert asked, "Is this the same photographer who leaked those pictures?" His tone was mild, but my face flushed. I said the leak was an accident, probably someone hacking the file delivery site. Evan didn't correct me, but I saw the faint twitch in his jaw. Eileen poured more wine and murmured that privacy was fragile these days. I laughed too loudly and said I had nothing to hide. Evan's sister Dana looked up from her plate, eyebrows raised. "That's a brave thing to say," she said quietly. The table went silent. Even the air felt thick. I tried to turn it into a joke, saying something about how social media always twists things. Evan just cut his food carefully and said, "That's why some people prefer to stay off it." After dinner, I offered to help clear the dishes, but Eileen said she had it covered. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Dana followed me into the hall and spoke low enough that no one else could hear. "You should be careful what you post," she said. "People screenshot everything." I pretended to be amused. "You sound like my fiancé." "Maybe listen to him," she said, walking away. In the car, I tried to laugh it off. "Your sister's still in lawyer mode. You'd think she was interrogating me." Evan didn't respond. His hand stayed steady on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road. "You could at least defend me," I snapped. "They think I'm the villain." He said, "You're very good at playing the part." "Excuse me?" "You don't even notice anymore. Everything becomes performance." "That's not fair." "Maybe not," he said, "but it's accurate." I wanted to argue, but something in his tone, flat, detached, made me swallow the words. We drove home in silence. When we got inside, I went straight to the bedroom, slamming the door harder than I meant. A few minutes later, I heard the faint click of that drawer again. I couldn't stand it anymore. I walked out and confronted him. "What's in there?" I demanded. He didn't look up. "Files." "Files about what?" "Our life. Don't you think that's creepy?" He stood then, slow and deliberate. "I think it's necessary." "For what, Evan? To blackmail me? Is that what this is now?" His eyes met mine, calm, steady. "It's for clarity." I laughed, short, bitter. "You're losing it. You're acting like some detective." He didn't reply. Instead, he reached for his jacket. I asked where he was going. He said, "Out." "Out where?" "Downtown." "At 10 at night?" "Some things need to be delivered in person." The way he said it made my stomach drop. I waited until I heard the door close before I went to his desk. The drawer was locked, of course. I tugged at it anyway, shaking it slightly, whispering curses under my breath. The faint rattle of paper inside only made me more desperate. I checked under the desk for a spare key, then in the little metal box he keeps on the shelf. Nothing. When I gave up, I saw his phone charger coiled neatly beside the printer. I unplugged my own and scrolled through my messages. Darren had texted again, "Still thinking about you. Wish things were different." I started typing, "Stop texting me," but deleted it halfway. Instead, I typed, "You always make everything complicated." Send. I told myself it was closure. That lie tasted familiar. Evan came home an hour later. I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch TV. He hung his jacket, nodded once, and sat across from me. The light from the lamp made half his face glow and left the other in shadow. "You went through my desk," he said. I froze. "How would you even know that?" "Because I left a slip of paper in the lock. It fell when you tried it." I opened my mouth to deny it, but the corners of his lips lifted slightly. No smile, just understanding. "You're predictable, Seren," he said. "Always chasing the version of control you can post about." I crossed my arms. "You're turning paranoid." He shook his head slowly. "No. Prepared." He stood then, and for a moment I thought he might leave again, but instead he said, "You should rest. Tomorrow's going to be long." "Why?" "I have a meeting. We'll talk after." I wanted to ask what kind of meeting, but he was already walking down the hall. The soft beep of his phone followed, then the quiet click of the guest room door. I sat there in the dim light, realizing the house had started to sound like him, ordered, distant, deliberate. The next morning, I found another sticky note on the counter. 10:15, downtown, that same phrase again. I crumpled it and shoved it into my pocket. I wasn't going to ask this time. When I got to my office, people were whispering again. Someone had printed out the viral post and pinned it on the break room board as a joke. My chest burned as I ripped it down. June tried to comfort me, saying rumors fade fast. I pretended to believe her. But when I opened my email, there it was again, an anonymous message with the subject line still smiling. Inside was the photo of me and Darren from 2 years ago at a bar, his hand on my shoulder, both of us laughing. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I left early, claiming a migraine, and drove straight to my mother's house. She was thrilled to see me until I told her Evan and I weren't speaking much. "You need to remind him who he's marrying," she said, pouring tea. "Show him you're not afraid." "That's not helping," I muttered. She frowned. "You've always been dramatic. Just post something sweet about him. Make it public. Men love when the world thinks they're adored." It was terrible advice, but I wanted peace. That evening, I drafted a caption under a photo of us holding hands. "Through ups and downs, love wins." I tagged him. Within minutes, people started commenting heart emojis, telling us how beautiful we were together. I felt the first rush of relief in weeks, until I noticed Evan had seen it but didn't react. No like, no comment, nothing. He came home late, eyes tired, face unreadable. "Nice post," he said quietly. "See, I'm trying." He nodded. "You always are when people are watching." "Why do you keep saying things like that?" I snapped. "You make me sound fake." He met my eyes. "Then stop proving me right." I turned away, blinking fast. "I'm done talking to you when you're like this." He didn't follow. From the hallway, I heard him say, almost softly, "Good. Maybe now I can finish things properly." The words hung in the air long after he closed the door. For a moment, I didn't breathe. "Finish what?" I whispered, but he didn't answer. Later, I stood at the window, staring down at the streetlights. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Darren, unreadable through the blur of my tears. I didn't open it. For once, I didn't want to. When I turned around, the guest room light was still on. The faint scratch of a pen, the hum of the printer, the quiet beeps of digital order, all steady, methodical, final. Monday morning felt wrong before I even opened my eyes. The room was bright but cold, too clean, as if Evan had vacuumed at dawn. The air smelled faintly of his aftershave, that citrus one he only wore for meetings. I rolled over, expecting to see his phone charging, or his watch on the nightstand, but both were gone. On the dresser sat a single envelope with my name written in his small, even handwriting. I didn't open it. My hands were shaking too badly. I told myself it was probably something practical. A receipt, a list of errands, anything except what my gut whispered. I made coffee, half expecting to hear his key in the lock. The silence pressed on my chest. When I finally opened the envelope, there was only a single sticky note inside. "We'll talk soon. Handle yourself properly." No explanation, no signature. That calm handwriting made my heart race. I checked his side of the closet. The hangers were still there, but most of his clothes were gone. His shoes, too. Even the drawer with his socks, empty except for one folded note reading, "Archive B." I stood there for a long time, clutching my phone. I wanted to call, but my pride wouldn't let me. If I called, it would mean I cared more than he did. So I texted instead, "What is this? Where are you?" No reply. 10 minutes later, "I deserve an answer." Still nothing. I spent the rest of the morning pacing the living room, trying to convince myself this was a test. Maybe he wanted me to chase him. Maybe he needed space to think. That was what people said in those online articles about relationship balance. At noon, I went to work, pretending everything was fine. I told June he was on a business trip, that we'd had a silly argument but were stronger than ever. She gave me a sympathetic smile I hated. Around 2, Chloe called, asking if the rumor was true that Evan had moved out. I asked where she'd heard it. She said a friend from the venue staff had seen him returning the deposit. I laughed so hard it came out wrong. "Of course not. We just postponed the date." Chloe hesitated. "Seren, maybe you should—" I said it's fine. I hung up and sat there staring at the monitor, the cursor blinking like it was mocking me. I opened my browser, typed his name. Nothing new on his social media, just the same profile picture of us from last Christmas. I thought about deleting him from my posts, but that would make it real. That evening, I found the spare key missing from the bowl near the door. The printer tray was empty again, but the faint smell of ink hung in the air. I looked through the trash and found shredded bits of paper, black text in narrow strips, nothing readable. My mother called around 8. "He's still sulking?" she asked when I told her he'd left. "He's not sulking. He's planning something." "Then let him. He's bluffing. When he realizes he can't live without you, he'll crawl back." I wanted to believe her, but deep down, I didn't think Evan crawled anywhere. By Tuesday, co-workers avoided me in the hall. Someone must have said something, because my manager asked if everything was stable at home. I forced a smile and said yes. On my lunch break, I scrolled through Evan's contact photo, hovering over the call button again and again. Finally, I sent another text. "This is childish. We need to talk like adults." He read it, no reply. That evening, I poured wine and sat on the balcony. I kept rehearsing what I'd say when he finally came home. I'd start calm, maybe even apologize a little, not fully, just enough to seem mature. Then I'd turn it around, tell him he'd scared me. That silence was cruel. He'd realize I was right. He always did, eventually. Around 10, headlights swept across the curtains. I jumped up, nearly knocking over the glass. The door opened, and there he was, calm, composed, carrying nothing but his briefcase. "Where have you been?" I demanded before he could speak. He set down the case, removed his jacket, and said simply, "Busy." "Doing what?" "Sorting things out." "Sorting what things out?" "Proper things." The word made me pause. "Proper? You disappear for 2 days, and that's what you call it?" He didn't answer. He just walked to the kitchen, poured water, and said, "You should sit." I stayed standing. "You owe me an explanation." He took a sip, eyes steady. "No, I owe you honesty. The two aren't always the same." That line stung. I crossed my arms. "You're not making sense." "I am," he said quietly. "You just don't like the meaning." He went to the guest room, and I followed. The drawer I'd tried before was unlocked now. Inside were neat stacks of folders, each labeled by date. I reached for one, but he closed it gently. "Don't," he said, "then tell me what's going on." He met my gaze, calm but final. "I'm handling it properly." I almost laughed. "Properly? You think ignoring me is proper?" He shook his head. "No, properly means legally." The word hit like cold water. "Legally? Evan, what are you talking about?" "You'll see soon enough." I tried to joke, said he was being dramatic, but he didn't smile. He took a new key from his pocket and locked the drawer again. I wanted to scream, to tear the whole room apart, but he just stood there, unmoved. "You think this is revenge?" I asked finally. "You think you can punish me into guilt?" He looked almost sad. "No, I think you've done that yourself." That night he slept in the guest room again. I lay awake listening to the faint rhythm of his typing. Every few minutes came the soft beep of a phone notification, a muted upload chime, then silence. Around 2, I heard him leave. The door clicked shut and his car started. I got up and looked out the window, his taillights fading down the street. The next morning, I opened the fridge and found it emptier than before. The shelf where he kept his lunch containers was spotless. His ring was gone from the counter. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. At noon, Chloe sent me a text. "Are you okay? I heard something from Dana." My stomach twisted. "He talked to her?" She didn't say much, just that he's doing things by the book. I typed, "He's overreacting." Chloe replied, "Seren, maybe it's time to stop performing." I dropped my phone and stared at the wall. Performing. Everyone kept using that word lately, as if everything I did was fake. I wanted to scream that it wasn't performance, it was survival. People admire confidence. They don't forgive weakness. That night, I cooked dinner, even though he wasn't home. The smell filled the apartment like a memory of something steady. I plated 2 portions, poured 2 glasses of wine, and waited. Hours passed. The candles burned low. The only sound was the soft hum of the printer starting again. I walked over, trembling. The screen displayed transferring file. Complete. A single sheet slid out, blank except for one line typed across the middle. Proceeding properly. I tore it in half, then into pieces, scattering them like confetti across the floor. My phone buzzed in my hand, an unknown number. The message preview said only, delivery confirmed. I didn't open it, I just stood there, surrounded by scraps of paper and the smell of burnt wax, realizing that for the first time, Evan hadn't raised his voice, hadn't argued, hadn't even asked for forgiveness. He'd simply prepared. I thought about chasing him, about begging for clarity, but a part of me knew it was useless. Whatever he was doing, it was already in motion. He'd said he would handle it properly. I finally understood what that meant. The hotel lobby buzzed with quiet voices and camera flashes. I'd worn my best white dress, thinking we'd reconcile here, maybe talk about rescheduling the wedding. When the elevator opened, Evan stepped out in a dark suit, calm as ever, Dana beside him holding a slim folder. Before I could speak, a man in a blazer approached and asked for my name. I nodded, confused. He handed me an envelope. The cameras clicked. Inside, the heading was bold. Notice of civil complaint, defamation and breach of agreement. My throat closed. "Evan, what is this?" I whispered. He looked at me the same way he had that day by the river, steady, unreadable. "You wanted everything public," he said softly. "Now it is." Around us, the flashes kept firing. My hands shook, paper rustling louder than the crowd. He turned away, and the noise swallowed me whole.